hormone.
Hey guys, Evan's here. Um, always having a good time here at CNU Fet. Well, I'm here with the crew. We're super excited to be chatting with you guys on the topic of hormones. I thought I spelled it right,
I can
you
be
know,
wrong.
but the question is, are hormones holding me back? So where this question actually alluded or came from, I was, having a conversation. It's a conversation I have fairly often, but it was just the other day when I was in bed with Dana, and she was like, "What is your thought process on, aging, hormones, and when it comes to fat loss?" So I'll probably wrap up with that philosophy or thought process. But before I go into it, we're going to have Amanda share a little bit about what's research saying and, things we ought to know when it comes to the aging process, as well as hormones and everything else. And if you guys have comments or questions, please don't hesitate to ask those questions. We're going to pop them in, answer them, and rock and roll from there. So, Amanda, the floor is yours.
Hi. So, what menopause affects the body is mostly the central fat distribution. So, postmenopause, typically women have higher body fat percentage. The central fat distribution, that's the apple shape. That's where you're gaining all your weight in your abdominal area. These are the causes of that. But what I also found in a lot of the research was that it's the aging. So weight gain increases in both sexes as your age progresses. So the women tend to gain more weight with the age, independent of the menopausal status. So this can be because of physiological changes and also lifestyle changes. You can't eat the same thing. You can't work out the same amount as you did when you were 20 years younger. So that is especially an issue. Sleep disturbances contribute to weight gain. So if you're not sleeping, if you're not recovering after working out, that is also another huge thing, because that can lead chronic sleep deprivation can lead to increased daytime fatigue, which decreases the likelihood of physical activity.
Awesome stuff. So basically, though hormones are a big factor, we have to look at things like how's my sleep and recovery, how's my nutrition, because I'm older and I do have this displacement of hormones, then I can't do what I used to do and still get the same kind of results. And I think, whether it is, exercise specifically or these recovery things, a lot of people have the same mindset that, hey, I can do what I used to do, but I'm not in the same place, which is a huge, huge challenge that we have. So let's talk a little bit about, I'm going to make some of these changes. I understand that I'm not in the same place. How does nutrition play into it? What's your thought process? Take your time, Katie, and take us in.
Yeah. So like Amanda said, I'm this perimenopausal, menopausal state. So when that estrogen starts to decrease in the female body, and estrogen does play a lot of roles in all kinds of hormone signaling in the body, including a role in how insulin and cortisol affect us. So the long and short of behind all of like the chemistry is that women do tend to start to store away fat versus building muscle as they go through this change. But that does not necessarily mean that you cannot burn fat and build muscle. What I would say is that it's a great time to lean into looking at what your nutritional habits are. Because your resting metabolic rate might be decreasing, not only with the menopause, but with how you've treated your body as you've aged, right? Perhaps you haven't been eating enough for years, so now we're compounding that. So it's a perfect time to start paying attention to what you're eating. It can be macro tracking, you can be using MyFitnessPal, but by actually looking more at what you're eating, you can still hit those goals regardless of the changes happening in your body. There are certain foods that might help you. An example would be like bone broth, joint health, connective tissue with the collagen in it. So there are certain things you might eat in order to help. There are certain foods you might stay away from. There's research saying maybe like xenoestrogens, like the soy, could be something you might want to avoid. But overall, leaning into nutritional habits is important. So cleaning up what you're eating, pay attention to what you're putting into your body, because as that estrogen level does decrease, it's an important time to start paying more attention.
All right. So you hit us with a lot of big words and terms, and we got a smart crew down here at CU Fit, but help us out. So xenoestrogens, before we get into all that, so what happens is we experience what's called a hormonal imbalance, and it's not only in women. So for men, it's actually called andropause. So the same thing as menopause. We don't have a cycle that stops, but we do go a little off kilter because our testosterone starts dropping dramatically as well. So women need testosterone, and men need testosterone. Men do have some estrogen. There are some men who actually start converting testosterone to estrogen at a higher rate than normal. So, men, the way we get to estrogen is by converting testosterone to estrogen, and for women, vice versa. But if it's happening at an abnormal rate, we can have these challenges. Amanda specifically talked about how, it's not necessarily weight that changes a bunch because of menopause, it's fat distribution. So what's really going on? Katie talked about these lifestyle things. Well, typically the average adult winds up losing every year about a pound of muscle and gains about a pound of fat. I think from like 29, some things have said from 27, but, typically about, let's say if it's 30, we're being conservative, you gain a pound of muscle and you lose a pound of fat. So now from 30 to 40, every pound of muscle burns about 50 calories a day doing nothing. On average, the research says between 20 and 90. So if we say about 50 pounds a day doing nothing, you're going to burn about 50 pounds a day. 50 pounds, that'd be awesome, right? If you're 100 pounds of weight, you're like, I got 2 days and I'm done, back to normal living. But at 50 calories a day doing nothing. So we start tracking this over time, then our metabolism is actually slowing down in 10 years by 500 calories per day. So even if I didn't change my nutrition, just by my body changing over this time frame, now I'm at a slow metabolic rate, but a higher amount of calories, and I start gaining fat. So a lot of people said, man, I didn't do anything different. I just hit 40, or I just hit 45, or I just hit 50. What happened? Well, what happened was called the slide edge principle. A little bit over time was just ticking away and we didn't notice it. But what we did notice between 30 and 40, or between 35 and 45, 40 and 50, was I went from a size 6 to a size 8 to a size 10, even though my weight didn't change much on the scale. All of a sudden, I have this flabby thing that's going on, that's happening. So we have a question. I'll just copy that question in there. I'll answer it before we kind of transition forward. But the question is, can I convert, so from nutrition standpoint, how can I stop or slow down the loss of muscle conversion to fat? Well, a couple of things. One, muscle tissue does not convert to fat tissue. So what's happening is that I'm actually losing muscle and gaining fat, which leads us down another fun road, which is something called set point theory. And I'll answer the question, finish it. So set point theory, I forgot the name of the physician that came up with it. It's been over 30 something years, but basically he said that your body wants to maintain homeostasis, right? The same state. It gets hot, you sweat. It gets cold, you shiver. Your body's always making these adjustments to maintain the same state. Same happens with your weight. So because we were sedentary, or for whatever reasons, we start losing muscle tissue. Sometimes it's diet related. Our protein needs actually increase as we age because our bodies are not able to break down and use protein at the same rate. So you will notice that the bioavailability, or the way your body absorbs and uses protein, changes as we age. So older, as we go through these midlife years, we actually need a higher protein amount than we did when we were younger. Because our carb needs are higher when we're younger, our protein needs are higher as we age. So that's something that happens. But basically, we start losing or atrophying or catabolizing. We start losing muscle tissue, but our body doesn't want to lose weight. And because we also lost muscle tissue, we start slowing down our metabolism. Those extra calories you talked about was a gain in fat, netted us the same weight. So if I was 180 pounds, I'm still 180 pounds, but I lost muscle and I burned fat. So anytime you see a commercial and it's like, oh, convert that fat to muscle, that's a straight up lie. These are totally different tissues. It's like turning like metal to cloth. You know what I mean? It just does not happen. So that's what's happening. So from a nutritional standpoint, one of the things you can do is just increase your protein intake, to help with it. But you also do have to couple it with exercise, which is a great segue into Alexis, who's going to talk to us about some tips and things we can do when it comes to exercise in the menopausal years or with hormonal changes and things like that.
All right. So as Evan said, as we age, muscle mass does decrease, which means you're losing that muscle mass, and like you said, it's slow rate at which you can burn calories, which makes it to maintain your the healthy weight. So exercising is definitely an important component to do when it comes to the aging and the menopause and even the andropause, which is for guys. So some things you can do first is starting off with just trying to exercise at least not 3 times a day, but 3 times a week, maybe 30 minutes a day. Starting off with it can be aerobic exercising, especially for women, to basically get that heart rate up and to start burning that fat. Also, strength training is really important when it comes to building that muscle mass, because as you age, muscle mass starts to decrease. Like I've just mentioned not too long ago, it does start to decrease. So building that muscle is really important, and just adding in that little bit of strength training with some aerobic as well. And not just that, lifting weights, which is strength training, also is a better way of burning more efficient calories. And then it just also allows you to strengthen your bones, because as we do start to older, you start to lose the bones, and that's when risk factors such as osteoporosis, and you may experience some fractures as well as you start losing that bone mass. So it's important that we're doing the strengthening part, which is lifting weights and exercising. And then you want to start off, if you're not doing anything right now and you just want to start off slow, start off 30 minutes a day or 2 to 3 times a week, walking around your neighborhood, getting out at least 30 minutes. And then also what's really important when you're starting something and you want to maintain it for a lifestyle, it's important that you have that support system. You need to have the support system of anyone, your loved ones, friends that can help you support you to get to those goals. And then just also setting those realistic and why smart goals. So if you're not exercising, I don't expect you to go and work out for a whole hour your first day. No, let's take baby steps. You want to go 30 minutes of just regular walking, and then add little weight training slowly into your routine.
Awesome. And, to kind of piggyback on that, in this point of life, strength training is the most important thing you can do. Even if you have to say, you know what, I'm going to forego doing a bunch of aerobic initially and start with strength training, it's critical, because what it's going to do is allow you to get that slight boost in testosterone, which allows you to get the better gains. Now, I know a big concern that people have is hey, I don't want to be bulky. I don't want to look at you like you, Evans. Don't worry. If you're in that age group, it's extremely challenging because testosterone is really, really low. So, one of the, for a man, high or normal high, depending on how old you are, is somewhere over 1,000, 1,500 for your testosterone. For a woman, high is 90 to 100 something. So extremely different amounts, and the amount of testosterone needed to cause like muscle tissue to grow, it's on the higher side. So it's going to take a long time for someone to really put on muscle unless they're taking drugs, illegal drugs, steroids. So if you're not doing that strength train, because it is going to help speed up your metabolism. Again, if you can put on a pound of muscle, that means you're burning 50 more calories just sitting on the couch. Really, really cool. So that's something. Also under the training realm, is to ensure that you're doing what's what we call compound movements. Right. So a lot of times when people decide I'm going to start getting fit, the gyms are open, they decide I'm just going to walk the treadmill, or I'm going to do the elliptical. And yes, that's good for your heart. But at this point in your life, it's not going to really help you when we talk about fat burning. So we want to do things like squats. If you have a good, if you don't have, and that's the reason why we movement screen all our clients here, but, anyone can come and get movement screened, or you can go somewhere with a professional to tell you these are the movement patterns you should and should not be doing. But providing that you're cleared for it, squatting, deadlifting, anything that's going to, be like work with these called big muscle groups at one time are going to really help you get that spike in testosterone over that time. For fat loss, you also want to do something that causes your heart rate to go up fast and come down in a short period of time. So it's called like high intensity interval training. It can be done in any format. So it can be done as, I did squats really fast and then I took a break. Then I did squats really fast and I took a break. Or I can get on an elliptical or a rower, and I did a HIIT cycle, meaning maybe I went 10 seconds super duper fast, and then I went 40 seconds slow, or 10:30 or 15. It's always going to be different based on where someone is, and that's where having someone to kind of guide you through it is a critical. But if you do that kind of higher intense is a very relative term, so don't try to be like Katie's version of intense. Be your version of intense, you know what I mean? But if you do something like that, it's going to allow you to create something called epoch. Some people call it in the fitness world, like there's the afterburn effect. Basically, what you're doing is in maybe 10 minutes to 15 minutes, you're setting your body up to burn calories for the next 2 days. So how cool is that to do like a short workout and have a longer result? So there's a ton of research around it. I think one of the most popular pieces of research was they took these football athletes and they had them do HIIT training and measure their metabolism pre-workout. And they looked at a lot of different factors. They looked at their resting heart rate and the VO2 max. They looked at several different things, their pulse, all this kind of stuff. And then they said, okay, this is your baseline. They took them to a HIIT routine. I think it wasn't even 30-minute HIIT routine. And it took them 52 hours to get back to the resting metabolism, So it's kind of cool. So you don't want to do HIIT every day because it's going to stress out your neuromuscular system. And some people do that. And the challenge is they overdo HIIT, so there's great companies. I'm not going to put names, but their whole program is HIIT based. Well, the challenge is that when you do that every single day, you do get a spike in cortisol, but you also get a spike in testosterone. So cortisol becomes your friend when tied with testosterone. Now, cortisol is a hormone that's produced by your adrenal gland to help you manage stress. It breaks down sugar and helps you manage stress. But when it's chronically high, it works against you. It allows you to store this breakdown of sugar as fat in your abdominal region. So sometimes you have people who are like, hey, I'm ready to play ball. I want to get in shape and everything else, but they're doing these high intense training workouts 5 and 6 days a week or 4 or 5 days a week. And they're like, my body's not changing the way I want to. And the reason why is because from a hormonal standpoint, even though they're burning a lot of calories, they're in a hormonal disadvantage because their cortisol levels have never come down. So HIIT is really good, but too much of anything is not so good. But so you can do that maybe 2 to 3 days a week, and you're going to start seeing some major results because you train 2 days and your body's going to take a whole day sometimes just to get you back to homeostasis. The last piece with that, the reason why HIIT became so popular is because to burn that same number of calories, you would typically have to do more than double of the training load. So from a lifestyle perspective, someone in the menopausal point of life, you know, you're busier. So I don't have, you know, I talk to young people, it's like, yeah, I worked out for an hour and a half, you know, every day. I'm like, I don't got that kind of time. So, you know, this allows you to get the benefit of fat loss and the ability to build a little bit of muscle because you're working, and that's a whole nother conversation, but you're working in this like anaerobic muscle phase. So you do get, and when we say muscle gain, what we're talking about is like toned arms, nice glutes, nice legs, you know, tighter abs. You know, these are all due to muscle growing in these areas, a nice back, you know. So HIIT training and strength training, predominantly compound movements, are going to really, really help you. So, you know, I know there's questions out there. There's a lot of different questions. Alyssa's been accumulating the questions. Alyssa, hit us with some of the questions. Let's see how we can answer some of these questions.
Awesome. So the first one is actually just about what you just talked about. So what's a compound movement, first of all?
Nice. So a compound movement is any exercise that works two joints at one time. You know, so you target one specific muscle, but you're working two joints. So what's an example of that? It can be a lat pull down, targets my back predominantly, but the elbow and the shoulder joint is being moved. You know, or a push-up or a chest press is targeting my chest. So I do a chest press, targets my chest, but my elbow joint and my shoulder joint are being moved. So by default, though, when I do this push-up, even though I'm focused on my chest, I'm also getting some tricep activation. So I'm actually working two muscles, even though I have one primary muscle that's being worked. Similar on the row, right? I'm working my back predominantly, but my buys get a little bit of loving. You know, so I get to burn more calories at one time. My squats, that's going to work my quads and my glutes and a little bit of my hamstrings. Versus, let's say I have a squat, I can also do a leg extension and it's only working my quads. So I get to burn more calories with less effort in a compound movement. And I'm also building like the supporting muscle groups because I have less time. Great question.
Awesome. So some questions that I've heard a lot is, you know, is it even possible to lose the weight after you go through menopause?
Gotcha. So basically, why is it so hard to lose weight? You know, we know it is possible, right? Because there's women and men that are beyond those ages, and they're leaner. But the reason why it's so hard to lose the weight during menopause is there's a lot of different reasons. One, it has nothing to do with menopause. One has to deal with this habit that I've developed over time. So there's this idea, a lot of people use it, this teaching is, how do you boil a frog, right? You go, I want to lose weight, I don't want to eat frogs. Well, the way you boil a frog is you let the heat in the water heat up slowly. Because if it's in super hot water, a live frog can jump right out. But a live frog will sit in the pan and let the water heat up until he's a dead frog. So many times that's the way our habits develop, right? We didn't realize, like, hey, I just had one chip. I had two chips. And little by little bit, I picked up this habit of chips. Or, you know, I got busy, so I missed my workout this day. I missed it this week. I missed it this month, you know. And then over time, when we're looking at developing new habits, it takes a while for habits to stick in. So sometimes it's the behavior stuff that Katie talked about. Sometimes it's this this sense of feeling of, hey, look, I should be able to do that. You know, because our mind may be fresh and young, even though our body is going through this change. So it's like, no, I used to be able to run up the stairs and I was never winded. And then one day you're up the stairs, you're like, well, that body has changed. And similarly, you know, when it comes to fat loss, the body has changed. The other part is the psychological side of the fact that it takes longer than we think it should take. Because we've been bombarded with great marketing and advertising. You Google weight loss, you know, or weight loss program, and everybody's telling you you're going to lose like 10, 15 pounds this month. You're going to lose 14 pounds in 14 days. But in all reality, I've literally actually went on this little quest a couple of weeks ago, and I started polling all this fitness professionals I knew across the country. And I was like, how long, if someone's following a program, how much weight should they lose in 90 days? And people were like, well, everybody hesitated on the whole if they're following the program part. Because they're like, it'll probably take them longer than 90 days to start following. That was the number one answer. I was like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that one, but that's the number one answer and it's real, right? So I actually have, I'm super excited. I'm gonna finish answering this question, but I'm super excited that I have this professional that's been working in the weight loss and hormone industry for like a while, long enough to totally understand the concerns that's in there. But I'm finished answering this question. I'm going to read the pedigree of this gentleman here. So, but yeah, they've been bombarded with all this advertising and marketing that said that they should lose weight in a shorter period of time. But the number one answer was in 90 days, 15 pounds was a good weight loss in their 90 days of following the program. So before we go into anything else, we're going to actually have him answer the rest of the questions. I want to introduce to you guys Dr. Calvin Wilson. Dr. Wilson, he's had his own medical practice here in Delaware and Kent County for, I think, over 20 years now. Most of Kent County knows him because he delivered their children at some point, OB/GYN practice. And then in the last maybe 12, 15 years. He was the first person I remember when he would start talking about hormones, hormone therapy, the need for adjusting your hormones. People were like, he's crazy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's messing with people's bodies and stuff like that. And all those people that were physicians saying that now all do it. So it's kind of wild how the acceptance rate and the knowledge has grown. But we watched him be flown out to Hawaii as a guest speaker to talk about it because he's leading one of the top physicians in the nations when it comes to hormones, hormone therapy, and everything else. So we're just super excited to have you on here. So Doc, before we go into the questions, tell us a little bit about who you are. What's your experience with this whole hormone stuff? What do you do on a daily basis?
Wow. Well, thank you, Evans. First of all, thank you for the invitation. And I am super excited to be on a broadcast with the folks from CNU Fit, because I've also seen Evans and much of the staff at CNU Fit since the inception of the concept. And I tell you, first class, I've been blessed to work with some of the top fitness professionals in the world, literally. And I don't think that there are any of them that have a leg up on Evans and the folks at CNU Fit. So first, thank you for that. You really kind of summed it up. I've had an interest in medicine and prevention and exercise and nutrition my entire life. And unfortunately, in my opinion, here in the US, we spend so much time on treating disease rather than preventing disease. Our own Surgeon General's office tells us that 90+% of disease processes are preventable or at least significantly delayable, yet we spend less than 2% of our healthcare dollars on staying healthy. In fact, the quote unquote typical person, I don't like that term, but that's the way it was phrased, spends more in the last 2 weeks of their lives trying to stay alive than they spent their entire life trying to stay healthy. So what you guys are doing with the fitness, with the nutrition, with proper supplementation, and with educating people on what is real out there and what isn't is just indispensable. And I thank you for that.
Awesome. So talk to us first. We've been talking about menopause and things like that, and I appreciate you. I know you was coming down from one of the practices that you're working in here. We were talking about menopause and some of the symptoms and things that people are experiencing with it. But talk to us, like, what is menopause and andropause? Like, what is this thing?
Okay. Well, it's really simple. When you break the word down, menopause means menstrual stops. Pause means stops. So menopause, strictly speaking, is when the woman has not had a cycle for a year or more. It was also known as the change of life because initially when a woman would go into the time of menopause, we knew that she was within 5 or 6 years of the end of her life. Now, that was over a century ago that that term was coined. And now a woman spends probably a third or more of her life in the time of menopause. So it's very important to manage health during that time frame. Andropause just means that the testosterone levels drop out. And it's very interesting the way things work again here in this country. I love this country. We have freedoms and liberties. Many do not. But it's really interesting the way things go in the way of health. A few years ago, like you mentioned, you would talk about adjusting hormone levels in people that just say, oh my gosh, you don't need to mess with the levels. They are what they are. It's all part of quote unquote normal aging. But, and it is indeed, but it wasn't even believed that men had decreases in hormones for a while until there became products out there like creams, like roll-ons that were like deodorant. And then all you heard about was low T, low T, low T. And just like in women, even though there's no physical thing like a menstrual cycle that can that stops, we now know that men have significant drop-offs in testosterone, and that probably 50 to 60% of men 50 or greater, and it increases every year after that, have levels that are below what we consider optimal. And like you also mentioned already, it impacts everything from maintenance of lean mass. You talked about lean mass, its impact on metabolism, those 50 calories, and that's a day, folks, from sitting on the couch. The typical adult will lose between an 0.8 of a pound and a pound of muscle every year after age 28 to 30. So we're talking about menopause and andropause. So we're thinking much later in life, but it begins that early. And when that happens, the metabolism begins to slow down. A fact I share with my patients is that 9 out of 10 nursing home admissions are due to lack of muscle, loss of lean mass, so that people can't do the activities that they need to do day-to-day life. What I mean, carrying a load of laundry or of groceries, standing up from a commode because of this progressive loss of muscle. And diet and exercise, along with proper hormonal balance, are at the forefront of making those things or correcting those disorders.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. Thank you so much. So we have like several questions in here.
Okay.
One, I just got this one which is, why is it easier to just diet and lose weight before menopause? Like, why is it easier before menopause to do it?
There are a couple of reasons for that. The first is the fact that, as you also already pointed out, the metabolism is higher earlier in life. When lean mass is higher, metabolism is higher. Let me translate that little 50 calories a day for you. If you lose a pound of muscle and gain a pound of fat, like you pointed out, the scale stays the same. However, in theory, the body has the ability to gain an additional 5 pounds of fat due to that loss of metabolism, due to that loss of lean mass. So before the time of menopause, when lean mass is maintained and more, the metabolism stays up. At the time of menopause or andropause, when not only do those hormones have a slow drop, but a very rapid drop off, those hormones will actually support lean mass. So without those hormones being present, the loss of lean mass really accelerates if you're not doing something, again, proper diet and exercise to stave them off. And when that happens, the metabolism just can't keep up anymore, just kind of gives up, and it says, okay, here's some extra weight for you. Here's some extra fat specifically.
Wow. Wow. That's pretty awesome right there, Doc. I'm getting questions that are coming in. So So I'm going to ask them in there, but I just wanted to post this comment that you made here. So another question I got in is, you know, you know, you know, this one here, it says that, you know, I hit 45, and all of a sudden overnight, you know, I gained weight in my stomach. Is it possible to even get rid of it?
The answer is yes. And I'm sorry, I'm a bit of a realist. So no offense to the person who asked the question, but it didn't happen overnight. There were changes going on in your body for years that allowed this situation to occur. Now, hormonal changes can be a part of that, and that can be balanced out if it is a portion of it. Typically, when you're seeing weight gain in the midsection, you are talking about an excess of certain types of chemicals in the body or hormones with long names. They're called adipokines. Sometimes people become more what we call insulin resistant, meaning where they could get away with eating carbs all day long and half the night when they were younger. They don't have that ability anymore. And as they become more sensitive to carbs, or another way is to say more resistant to insulin, insulin turns on certain reactions in the body that will tell the body to store fat and not to burn fat. The solution to that is to make sure that you are taking in proper balance of protein, carbs, and fats. We call those the macronutrients. And it doesn't mean, well, cut out all carbs and do higher fat. Go extreme with this diet or that diet. I'm not going to name them. It means find what works for you. And so the answer is yes, it is possible to lose that, but it takes more diligence. Sometimes it will mean needing to track what you're taking in, not just the calories, because the body will not respond the same to 1,200 calories of Haagen-Dazs and Krispy Kreme as it does to 1,200 calories of chicken breast and broccoli. So the macros need to be made up of the correct balance for that individual. The high intensity interval training that you've already discussed, that was an incredible discussion of the high intensity interval training, will help to kick that in. And you mentioned as the metabolism stays up, then it continues to burn that fat over the course of time. And then there are some supplements out there that can, along with proper diet and exercise, can help to target fat in those areas, visceral fat. And the most prominent one of those is one known as EGCG. It is a green tea extract. You can get enough EGCG by consuming green tea. I literally have never seen anybody who could take in enough green tea to do it, though. It would be the equivalent of over 20 glasses of green tea per day. I don't think it's realistic long-term for anybody, honestly. So it can be obtained in supplement form. And I know that CNU Fit carries what I consider to be the top version of that out there, so they can get that from you.
Yeah, I've even learned that, you know, the best versions of ECGC has phytosome tied to it, because the bacteria in your stomach will destroy tea leaves, you know. Right. So green tea doesn't make it into the digestive system where your body will absorb it and really see the benefit from that. So I do have another question here about estrogen mimicking foods like soy. Are they bad for you? Should you be eating it during this time of life? I'm seeing conflicting data out there.
Yes. And I think we're going to continue to see that. You know, the good thing is that these things are being studied. The bad thing is that you can do a search on anything and think you're coming up with good answers if you don't know the proper places to do research. So you're doing a search instead of research. And the answer is, let me split that into two parts. First of all, I would absolutely, I know this question does not refer to males, but for males, I would absolutely avoid those things. The soy proteins in particular, and specifically genistein and diadesin, do mimic estrogen and literally can cause fat gain. Sorry, ladies, but genetically, ladies are more predisposed to store greater amounts of fat than males are. And part of the reason for that is estrogen. It's been interesting, and some of this research has just been coming out in the last couple of months, is that having estrogen levels that are too low after, as would be the case after menopause, will actually contribute to fat gain in women. So there does seem to be this sweet spot, this narrow window of where the estrogen levels can be. And so I think we really need to see more on where the soys will play out with that. But in general, I don't think, unless there's a really huge intake of them, that's going to be detrimental in a female.
Wow, that's good to know. That's really cool. Because I know a lot of people's like, oh, and I think I've even had that mindset as well, where it's been, well, I'm at that time of life, cut the soy, because it mimics estrogen. So it's good to hear that as long as I'm not overdoing it, then you can enjoy some edamames and some other healthy soy options that's in there. Another question, and thank you so much just for taking your time and sharing, with our community. But what if I eat healthy foods and exercise? I'm still not seeing results. Is my metabolism dead? That's a question that probably get asked with the same tone that I put in there too.
It's one that I literally hear every week. And here's the thing, you can eat healthy, but it may not be the right things for that individual. They may be good foods, but just not proper for that individual. So that's somebody I would really recommend have an extensive review of what they're taking in, have it compared with what they should be taking in from the macro standpoint, because I just find when I've done nutritional program, and I don't do a lot of them anymore, but there are studies showing when people thought they knew what they were taking in, that they were typically off by about 50%. So that can be one of the first things that can be a difficulty, is you may not be eating as healthy a fashion as you think. Second one, make sure that it is the proper amount for you. One thing that I find very commonly, because this is an area that there is controversy on, and I heard you discuss the increasing need for protein, there's still people out there saying that too much protein is bad for your body or bad for your kidneys. There was only one study that revealed that, or that suggested that, and that was a study done in France several decades ago, and all of the participants had end-stage renal disease. In other words, they had kidney disease so badly that it was killing them to begin with. And those are people who should avoid protein. But in a normal, healthy individual, I typically find that the amount of protein that's being taken in may be too low. Think of it this way. We all know that the body is 70 to 75% water. And so obviously taking in water at least a rate of 1/2 ounce per pound of body weight is necessary. The second most plentiful nutrient in the body is protein. Hair, skin, nails, muscles, and organs are all made out of protein. If you're not getting enough protein in, your body does not want to tear itself down. So if you're deficient in that, the body can slow the metabolism in an effort to preserve itself. So very important to make sure that the macros are balanced for that individual.
Gotcha. And somebody just posted this in here. If protein is so important for women during menopause, what if I'm a vegetarian? If soy can cause fat gain, what else is available to me?
And that's a tough question. First of all, my respect is out there for those who follow a vegetarian diet. I've thought about it for very brief periods of time and given up on it quickly, because I know that my body needs more protein than I personally can get from veggies. Now, here's the thing with vegetables. Proteins are made up of substances known as amino acids. And with amino acids, there are several, you'll find arguments on the number. The most common number you'll see, 10 that are essential, that will make up a complete protein. So for someone who chooses to follow a vegetarian lifestyle, and there's no quick way to answer that on here, and I'm not an expert at that, to be honest with you, but they have to be an expert at combining foods so that they are getting complete protein and not having their training and their day-to-day activity result in lean body loss of lean mass. So is it possible? Absolutely. There are several supplements out there that are vegetarian friendly, that may be protein shakes or protein powders or other things that will make sure that the proteins that are obtained in there are what we call complete proteins. But complete protein is the secret to a vegetarian lifestyle.
Awesome. Last question. Well, there's two. You know how I am,
That's okay.
Two questions, but this is the second last one. What if, I see people are under eating,
Yeah.
quite a bit, but they're not understanding why when they're giving a nutritional program, why there's so many calories relative to what they're currently eating? Because after all, if I'm under eating, shouldn't I be losing weight?
Yeah. And that's because we've been taught that weight is a balance between calories in and calories out. And it indeed is a balance between calories in and calories out. However, what we don't take into account is what I like to call the interest rate. It's a silly analogy, so I apologize to you and anybody who's viewing this on that. But that interest rate is your metabolism. Again, the body most wants to do what we call maintain homeostasis. It wants to maintain a set point. It wants to not change. When you cut calories very low, the body can tolerate it for short periods of time, but it's been shown to, within a week, in most cases, compensate by slowing the metabolism down. So when the metabolism slows down, you can now maintain weight on a much lower total of calories a day. And the net result is that when there are those times when someone is cheating or they grab something here, the body is so happy to have calories because it wants to maintain itself and to survive that it's going to store those right away. So under consuming calories is one of the biggest mistakes that I see made in my practice as well, Evans. And we've got to work people up again to that proper macronutrient balance for them. So that often means, and it's terrifying to people who want to lose weight, that sometimes you need to increase those calories initially. Even more terrifying is the fact that it will appear they're right, that when they do start to increase them, the weight will go up some. But invariably, I see when we hit that right number, that right balance, that weight will begin to come off and that people feel better, live healthier, and are able to keep the weight off long term.
That's awesome. And one of the things we try to encourage people is that the weight is only one measurement.
Absolutely.
So once you increase those calories, your body starts restoring glycogen, which is lean mass. You start getting better energy. You can manage stress a little bit better. Your sleep quality increases. So you're having all these biofeedback tools that are telling you, hey, I am actually healthy now. You're not as tired as you were. And then through that, you can perform at a higher clip, you can recover better, and you can see those gains. So we really appreciate your time. The people are trying to figure out, if it is my hormones, how can I get a hold of you to figure that stuff out? How can they get in contact with you and your team?
Okay. Well, thank you for that. First, let me make one other comment.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure that you teach this to your clients as well. But as you mentioned, weight is not the only measure. You need to be somewhere like Seeing You Fit, where they're going to tell you what your body composition is. Understand that right now, about 70 to 75% of people in this country are considered overweight or obese. Obesity has replaced smoking as the #1 cause of preventable death in the country. However, we understand that it is more what the weight is made of. For instance, I can tell you for sure, having known Evans for a while and knowing some of his statistics, etc., that Evans falls into the realm of clinically overweight and it sometimes clinically obese. Now, for those who know him, I know you're looking at me and saying, you've got to be crazy right now. Why do I say that? Because his weight on the height weight tables or the body mass index can take him to a level where he is considered obese, but he is lean enough that his body will act like he is significantly less. Now, here's where that becomes important. We see this, and particularly the phenomena is greater in females, because females, I have studies to back this up, are more likely to follow the scale than males. If something fits a certain way with a male, or if they can suck their gut in enough in the mirror, they're happy with where they are. But females, very likely to take a look at the scale, and about 10% of the population now falls into a realm known as normal weight obesity or skinny fat. And what that means is that their weight may be normal, but the amount of body fat they carry can increase their risk of high blood pressure, stroke, diabetes, cancer, arthritis, dementia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, even though the scale says that they're in a good place. To answer your question, if someone is interested in getting an assessment from us, it's very easy to call our office. We're doing consults during this time, and we're probably going to stick with it even virtually at this point. And our number is 302-734-9200. Again, that's 302-734-9200.
That's awesome. I didn't type it that fast, so I appreciate it. That's awesome. Available. Let me just put this up here so everybody can see it. So yes, and this is going to be in our newsletter. It's going to be on our YouTube page, on our Facebook page. So everybody will know, okay, cool. If I want to get a consultation, it's not necessarily based on our field. There's blood work. There's all kinds of stuff that's done to be able to figure out where you are from that standpoint. So if you guys can stay on, but for the Senior Fit family and everybody who's watching, thank you. Hopefully it's added a lot of value to you guys, and you'll see it in the broadcast and coming up.